You're so beautiful, Elizabeth. You're getting me so choked up. That's so beautiful. I mean, wow. From We Run With You, I'm Kathy Wynn.
And I'm Rob Alvarez. This is Doing Good. This season, we interview brain aneurysm survivors and caregivers to learn how they are navigating new challenges and finding their own way of doing good.
We couldn't have done season 2 of Doing Good without an interview with Elizabeth Ratta, fellow brain aneurysm survivor, mom, wife, runner, and advocate. This was truly a special interview with someone who we are so grateful to have crossed paths with. Elizabeth has done so much for the brain aneurysm community. She established a research grant in honor of her grandmother, and she continues doing good by providing support for families of patients in need at University of Vermont Medical Center. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us all the way from Lincoln, Vermont, correct?
Yep, correct.
Cool.
Yeah, welcome to the show. So excited to connect with you. I don't know, we got to spend some time with you. I don't know when that was.
Last year.
No,
last year after Boston, right? And
Yes.
recently,
but yeah, let's talk about more recently.
when someone promised me that Vermont was going to have very cooler weather. But I won't hold you to it. I won't hold you to it.
Nice springtime in Vermont. So we got to spend a little time and get to know you. So that was awesome. But now, I'm so glad you're accepted our invitation to be on the podcast, because I think a lot of our listeners will really find a lot of value in your story. So, as everybody knows, we have been interviewing brain aneurysm survivors to share, their stories and their perspectives on what they went through and how their life was before it and during and after. So, maybe we'll just maybe we'll go back first. Um, can you share with us, what life was like for you before your brain aneurysm?
Yeah, I mean, pretty normal, boring life. I was, working per diem at a hospital and mostly raising my kids. So they were 3 and 6 when I had my aneurysm, but kind of mostly taking care of them. I was pretty active, kind of like hiking, running, things like that. There was nothing. I was not concerned about my health in any way. I was just kind of like a really regular person.
Now, what year was your aneurysm?
2018.
Okay.
I had just turned 40. And so we moved from northern Vermont. We lived literally right on the Canadian border, like an eighth of a mile from the border. Our road ended in Canada. And we moved to more like kind of central Vermont. And when I moved, I wanted to establish care with a doctor because I have a background in public health, and that's like the responsible thing to do. And so I kind of just found someone and went in for a physical when I turned 40. So up until that point, completely normal, active person, no inclination really that there was anything going on. Although in retrospect, when I think back, I had maybe some warning signs in there.
So yeah, maybe that's one thing I was really interested in digging into was, how just leading up to that, was, if there were any symptoms that you felt or any signs or indications at all?
Yeah. So at the time, I didn't recognize it, which is actually really embarrassing because my grandma had a brain aneurysm. And had I kind of educated myself better about the warning signs, I would have recognized. Mine was that I was getting very severe headaches behind my left eye. So severe that it happened once. I was nursing my little kiddo, and it was like 2 a.m, and it was so painful that I almost had my husband take me to the ER. But I thought, oh, I don't want to like make my kids have to leave the house in the middle of the night, and I don't have to like wake my husband up and bother him. And in retrospect, that's literally one of the very few warning signs that there are for brain aneurysms, is that you get this severe pain just behind one left eye. So when I went for that physical, with my new primary care provider, and she kind of was like going over my medical history, I said to her, I think something hormonal is going on now that I'm in my, I'm 40, and I'm getting these like really weird headaches behind my left eye. And so she didn't say anything then. I mean, she kind of kept asking me questions about my medical history more, and specifically about my grandma who had had an aneurysm at age 50. Her warning sign was double vision. And afterwards, I went home and the office called and said, just for peace of mind, your PCP wants you to get an MRI. And going into it, I thought, oh, this is just her being cautious. This is nothing. My husband said, should I go with you to the MRI? I said, oh, no, this is nothing, you know? And it was a Friday evening at about 6 o'clock. I got a call from the on-call doctor. And as soon as I saw the number, I thought, oh gosh, it's Friday night. They're calling me. And that's when she told me I had left MCA aneurysm. So just, behind my left eye. And right away called the on-call neurosurgeon, who ended up being my neurosurgeon, Dr. Bruce Tranmer, who, aside from my husband, is the love of my life. And he agreed to see me already that Monday. So I didn't have to wait very long to be seen, which was great, but enough time to spend a weekend Googling everything I could about aneurysms, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Learning too much of the things that you wish you didn't want to know, right?
So
Yeah,
were,
even
so were these headaches, was it just prior, or did you kind of experience them in sporadically in
it was
early
sporadic.
years?
It was sporadic. It was intermittent. And I would say they took place maybe for about 6 months or a year before my diagnosis, but they were intermittent. So I think it was easy for me to brush off and think, this is something hormonal. This is just, my body getting older or something, and they were intermittent. It was definitely not a constant thing, but it was very specifically behind my left eye.
Oh wow. So
And sorry.
no, so I guess they didn't last very long, but they were always in the
Same eye.
same eye, same location.
Same eye, always
Oh,
behind the left eye, and I would say they would last 12 hours
okay.
maybe.
Wow, that's long.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And, even the PCP who was on call, who called me to tell me, she said the reason why she wanted to call the neurosurgeon, she actually put me on hold while she was calling the neurosurgeon,
Mhm.
because even for her, she was like, I don't know what to tell you what to do this weekend. Like, am I supposed to tell you not to run this weekend? Am I supposed to tell you not to be like picking up your kid? So even for an educated primary care doctor who was wonderful, she even was uncertain, kind of, what do you do when you have an unruptured brain aneurysm?
Wow.
Now, if you don't mind, let me take a step back.
Yeah.
And it's so great that you already had an established primary care provider before you moved. Do you feel that because you had a female doctor, she delved more and listened more to your concerns?
I do. No offense, Rob. I 100 million% think that is true. And I also think it's Lauren Bierman. I'll put a shout out to Lauren Bierman. She's a nurse practitioner, and she's just a very special person and was very thorough. She actually was the one that slowed me down, because I really kind of fluffed off what I was saying and just was like, kind of like, oh, these headaches or whatever. And she kind of flipped back on the form. You fill out what's your family history. And I had to write in that my grandma had a brain aneurysm, because that's not one of the check boxes on those forms. And she kind of kept going back and forth and was like, well, wait, how old was your grandma when she had her brain aneurysm? She was 50. And just kind of like kept asking me questions, even though I naturally was kind of pushing forward. She definitely slowed me down. And so, yeah, Lauren Bierman, she's a nurse practitioner. She actually doesn't practice anymore. She ended up going for her doctorate and does kind of psych work with patients now. But she definitely was a very, very good practitioner. And yes, I think it's because she was female too.
Yeah, so sometimes I don't like, you even wonder if anyone's reading all that history that you that you
Mhm.
fill out when you go visit your doctor.
Yeah.
It's like, does anybody
Yeah.
even look at all this family history, medical
I was
history?
so impressed by her, because she just really, it was like she had all the time in the world for me, and she was going to figure this out. It was very
Right.
cool. And then she says, it wasn't until afterwards, when I think she was kind of documenting about it, that she decided to order the MRI. And, my grandma has died actually from cancer when she was, she didn't die from the brain aneurysm, died from cancer when she was about 70. But she says, I think it was your grandma that made me order that MRI
Oh,
because something
wow.
just nagged at her. Something nagged at her that there was something going on.
I think a lot of these conversations we have with survivors, there's those little moments, or there's those sometimes they're crossroads, or little lucky breaks that,
Hmm.
at least it appears from hindsight, lucky breaks, that we run into that leads us to where we are, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah, I mean, you guys know my whole connections thing. Like that was my title
Yes.
for your We Run With You piece, and just, you know, I became so grateful for everything in this process. Like whoever invented MRIs, who invented Zofran, because I was getting really sick and I was just like, oh my gosh, whoever invented Zofran is like my hero. Just I think when you're experiencing something so kind of epic and traumatic, you really do search for those moments of gratitude. And part of it is the big things like MRIs, but part of it is, the care that you receive. Lauren taking her time with me.
Hmm.
I often talk about like after surgery, the nurses braiding my hair and just making me feel human again, because, you have all those electrodes and it's
Yeah.
glued, and my hair was just like, I don't even know, greasy and glue and whatever. And just they put my hair in braids. And I just thought, gosh, that made me feel so human. And they probably didn't even think anything of it. And the anesthesiologist was really special prior to my surgery and really made a connection with me. Her resident made me laugh like hysterically right before I went under. And that was such a gift because he just was very funny and very human. And when I tell my story, I certainly talk about the warning signs and the medical part of it, but so much of what I take from my story and what I want people to know is those moments that you guys are talking about, these connections and those seemingly little things. And one more thing I'll mention, that when you just think of the impact we have on other people's lives without even like thinking about it, um, my husband, Jeremy, who you guys know, went to get the car and, went to the parking garage to get the car. And I was sort of in a wheelchair in the front entrance of the hospital. And, I had this incision from, here down to my ears, like 36 stitches or something. And I looked like crap, like I looked really brutal. And everybody was sort of like averting their eyes and just like, I don't know if they didn't want me to feel uncomfortable.
Mm.
And there was one teenage boy walking with his parents, and he looked right at me and smiled.
Aw.
And I mean, I get choked up just like even telling you that story, because like, yeah, he was like, I see you, you're
Yeah.
good. Like, just made me feel human. And really, I want people to take that away too, that we all have that power. These seemingly like insignificant things that we can do for people to just sort of like lift them up can make all the
Mhm.
difference. 5 years later, that's still what I'm remembering.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. I mean, what you're saying, and to other listeners out there, it makes such a difference. Like you said, that when that teenager saw you and just gave you a smile, I
Mhm.
always like to call those little things, whether they're from your medical team to your neighbors or your friends who you haven't seen for years, who found out what happened to you. It's just these little
Mhm.
small acts of kindness. It really
Mhm.
goes a long way. And but yeah, I can
Mhm.
certainly understand your the connections, those little intimate connections that you're describing, and it's making me teary just thinking about, imagining,
You get it.
picturing that teenager. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Kudos to
Yeah.
him.
Like who you least expect it, this like 16-year-old boy or
Yeah.
whatever, like you wouldn't expect it. Yeah.
so-
And you get it. You get it,
Mhm.
Kathy. We have talked about this before, that being a brain aneurysm survivor is sort of like the best club you didn't know you wanted to be a part of, because there's something when you talk to another survivor that you
Hmm.
just get it. You get it.
Hmm.
And I think that's true. There's so much trauma if you have a ruptured brain aneurysm, and certainly the recovery from that, and your pictures, Kathy, and all of that, and especially for families to witness that too. And then kind of there's this trauma if you've had an unruptured aneurysm that I think a lot of us the time leading up between diagnosis and surgery is this like hugely stressful time of, is it going to rupture? And, for me, they did an MRI, but then they needed to do a CT angiogram, and then they needed to do a cerebral angiogram. So it was a period of months of, test after test to really kind of determine what shape it was, what size it was, could they clip it, would they coil it? And, so it's different, but the same in terms of there is some level of trauma that you go through with this, whether it's ruptured or unruptured.
So going back to uh, that weekend or that Friday you found out, and you said you found out on Friday, but then you didn't go in until Monday. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, I found out
So,
on a Friday evening.
so what was that weekend like, and what did you and Jeremy talk about, or how did you guys talk about it?
I mean, so like that, like everybody remembers where they were when like JFK was shot or when the Challenger exploded or whatever your generation think. Like I can remember almost minute by minute that night and that weekend. I got off the phone. My kids were watching TV. Jeremy was in the kitchen. And I remember I wrote it down on a Post-it note at first because I didn't want the kids to hear.
Mm.
I mean, they were 3 and 6, not that they know what an aneurysm is anyway, but just for me, it was very, very vital that I didn't create stress and worry for them. So I like wrote it down on a Post-it note. You guys know Jeremy. He's cool as a cucumber. He's just like, everything's going to be fine. I am not cool as a cucumber. I was definitely Googling. And then certainly, I called my parents, I called my sisters. I, was kind of telling people. And,
Mm.
my parents were like, should we come up right now? And, just kind of sort of explaining to people kind of what the process was going to be. I was going to meet with my neurosurgeon. I would say that the bulk of that weekend was me Googling every single thing I could about brain aneurysms. And luckily, one thing I discovered was a brain aneurysm survivor who shared her story, and it was unruptured, young mom. Just it very much paralleled my experience. And I probably read her story like 40 times that weekend. It was just like this life raft for me. And then over the next few months, I just kept reading it. It really was a life raft. And that's why this work that you guys are doing is so important, because you hope someone will stumble upon it and it'll help them in some way not to feel so alone, because it really is an isolating experience. Because I knew my grandma had one, but I was little. I was 10 when she died. I wasn't even born when she had her aneurysm, but I knew of it, but I certainly didn't know it intimately, and I didn't know anyone personally who had a brain aneurysm. So it really was me relying on the internet to kind of make connections. And sadly, I went to work that Sunday because I worked per diem and I worked on Sundays. And I told people at work, I worked in a hospital, and one of the nurses said, Elizabeth, do you know your old boss who had just moved to South Carolina? He's literally laying in the hospital right now from a ruptured brain aneurysm, and he died.
Oh my God.
And so that was hard. I was glad she told me, but that was really hard to have that kind of juxtaposition with what I was going through, because partly immediately I started feeling guilty that mine was discovered and his wasn't. Just he died, it just was a very heavy thing to sort of be paralleling what I was going through.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of tough to hear. I mean, not only the guilt from it, but just thinking about, well, what could happen? Like what's
Yeah.
yeah. So that's tough. And so you mentioned it took quite a while for them to, I guess, figure out what's the right approach to
Yeah.
to your situation. So can you walk us through that? Like what all went on? What was going through your mind? And
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to see my neurosurgeon, Dr. Tranmer, who, I kind of went into the appointment thinking, well, this guy might be a jerk, but if I feel like he can, because you think like neurosurgeons, I don't know what vision I had, but if he's a jerk, but I feel like he can do a good surgery on me, then okay, so be it. But if I don't trust him at all, my family was like, come home to Pittsburgh, or other people were like, go to Boston, because Vermont, I don't think people think of as being a place you necessarily would have brain surgery. But as soon as I met him, he was a genius, like literally a genius, brilliant man, and also made me laugh the very first appointment. And so I was like, this is my guy, and I didn't waver from that. And one thing I'll just tell a brief story of why, in fact, is we were getting ready to leave. Jeremy was with me, and Dr. Tranmer went to close the door, and then he paused, or he went to open the door for us, sorry, to leave. And then he paused and he turned around and he stared straight into my eyes and he said, Elizabeth, you are going to be completely fine. You are the one that has to believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, yeah, clung to that like a life raft. That's why he's my guy. But so then he said, when I look at the MRI, I'm not getting like a super great image of it. I think it's really wide. I think it's kind of at a bifurcation of two different arteries. The new technology is like coiling and stenting. And he's like, I just don't know that that's possible with your aneurysm. Let's get a CT angiogram to make sure. So a CT angiogram is where you get the CT, but they also inject the dye to get a better image. And so he did that one, and they all look the same to me, but he's like, oh, it's a much better image. This is great. But still, I really, I think he didn't want me to have to go through the craniotomy if I didn't have to. I really want to get a much better picture of this. And that's when he ordered the CT angiogram, or sorry, the cerebral angiogram. That's where they like go up through your groin and they kind of look in the camera and there's kind of all these images. They sedate you for that a little bit. And so that was an interventional radiologist. It wasn't Dr. Tranmer that did it. His name was actually Dr. Love, and he was really great doctor. He's very loving and caring. And as soon as he saw that, he came into my recovery room and sat down and said, sorry, it's got to be the craniotomy. It's very wide. There's really no way to successfully coil this and feel like it can be successful for long term. So, by that point, I was fine with that. At first I was convinced, as I was going down the Google rabbit hole, I was like, oh, I'll just get these coils. It doesn't sound like that big of a deal. And so at first I cried when he said I'd have to have the craniotomy. But by the time I really knew what was happening, I'd really come to terms with it and kind of felt at peace that, having a clip feels really permanent and safe. And I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to take medication for the rest of my life or anything like that. And then, that was in May of 2018, and then June 6th was my surgery. So I had to wait about another month after that just to get me kind of on the books for the surgery.
So did you ever question, well, what's going to happen? What are the risks in these, I guess, number of weeks while I'm waiting?
Yeah.
Because you always think, well,
Yeah.
it's got to be, and I think someone else has put it like you see it in Grey's Anatomy or and all those millions of doctor shows where they find
Yeah.
something. It's like we're gonna rush you to the ER and we're gonna get this done. It's like versus
Yeah. And I
we'll
think,
see you in a month.
Yeah. I mean, you would think with the type of aneurysm or the width or the wideness of your aneurysm, you would think like, God, this needs to be addressed like immediately, or anything that has to do with brain, heart, bleeding, potential bleeding. It's like something you just want to address right away, not wait like a month or
yeah.
and unfortunately for some of our fellow survivors that we've interviewed had to wait even longer. So I would be a wreck.
I
Complete
was.
wreck.
I'm not gonna lie. I was a complete wreck. Like there was one point I remember being like on my bedroom floor in the fetal position saying, I can't do this. And Jeremy just like comforting me and like, it's gonna be okay. I mean, yeah, no joke. I'm not even gonna try to hide it. I was a wreck. And, I think it's different, right? Like other diseases that people are diagnosed with, or you think of the heart, or you think they're kind of like a slow progressing thing, right? But a brain aneurysm is so unique that it literally could rupture at any time, right? So chasing my kids in the backyard, picking them up, I remember thinking like, am I straining myself so much? I was having nightmares and I would wake up with this like pounding and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm going to make it rupture because I'm like so stressed and I'm having nightmares. I definitely was not, I definitely was freaking out, 1,000,000% freaking out. I think the only thing that honestly really got me through was Dr. Tranmer was so calm about it and kind of said, statistically speaking, there's such a low risk to these rupturing, even on a yearly basis, let alone within a few months. If you're looking at the statistics, you're going to be okay. I think my family was questioning it, like, why is it taking so long? Why does he keep making you do more tests? I will say that, when I was being stitched up by the resident or whoever, and Dr. Tranmer went out to see my parents and Jeremy, who were waiting in the waiting room, he said, boy, is it good we did the surgery when we did. Her aneurysm was so thin, I could see right through it. I could see the blood rushing through it. Like it was so close to rupturing.
Mm.
I mean, that the only thing I can say to that is like luck was definitely on my side, because just so many things that lined up. Had I not make the doctor's appointment, had I not had the female, PCP who took her time with me, yeah, just so many things could have gone wrong. And yeah, just very grateful, very grateful.
Yeah. Wow. Can you take us through when the day finally came when they said, "All right, it's time for you to come in for
Yeah.
this surgery"?
So you guys aren't gonna believe this, because just what I told you, like crying on the bedroom floor, I can't do this, and freaking out nonstop. The morning of my surgery, whether it's prayers and if you believe in that, or whether it's people sending me good thoughts, but I literally have never felt more peace than I felt the morning of my surgery.
Mm.
I don't know why. I can't explain it. I will say it felt like very otherworldly. My mom jokes that I was acting like we were going shopping, like at the mall, like I was checking in, to the registration desk, and I was joking with the person putting the electrodes on me, and they couldn't get the line in my arm, and she was sort of like kind of massaging it to warm it up, and I said, "Oh, it feels like I'm at the spa, I'm getting my hair done, and you're massaging my arm." And Dr. Kramer came in and even thought they had given me some sort of medicine, because I was just like joking around with everyone. I think I worked through what I needed to work through before the surgery. I wrote my children letters in case I didn't make it through the surgery. I wrote Jeremy a letter. I kind of instructed him. I say a phrase to my kids every night when they go to sleep that's very specific every single night. And I instructed him to make sure he says that every night if I don't make it. But for whatever reason, that morning of, I was at complete peace with whatever was going to happen that day, and just put complete faith in my surgical team. And I wanted them to see that. I wanted them to know that I had complete faith in them. I made everybody pause. There's like 15 people in the room. Like, the neurology team was at my feet with their own IV. My neurosurgery team was at my head, of course, and all the nurses. And there's all these people. And I said to Dr. Tramer, just hold on for a second, when he was doing his check-in. And I said, I just genuinely want to thank everybody in this room for dedicating the next few hours of your lives to helping save my life. And it was just very important for me to connect with my medical team and let them know, I see you guys, I know what you're doing here, and show them that appreciation.
I did not know this.
Yeah.
You're so beautiful, Elizabeth. You're getting me so choked up. That's so beautiful. I mean, wow.
I'll tell the story now. Now it'll make you cry, though, because now I'll make you laugh, and I'll tell the story. I
didn't
won't
mean
say who the
to.
resident was, because
No, I thought
he
I
might
was.
be embarrassed.
No, that's just
Yeah.
so
Anyway, the
beautiful.
reason the
And
resident made me laugh right
yeah,
before he put
no,
the
and
mask on. Go
I
ahead. I'm
no,
sorry.
you caught me by surprise, because I
I'm
thought I
sorry.
knew. A lot of the friends that I've made from We Run With You, they share their stories, and I don't know, you just completely caught me off guard. But that's just so beautiful that you were conscious enough, um and in that mindset to even think to do that, because I think to for the medical team to hear you say that, it almost has, gives them like this instant connection to you, even though they don't know anything about you other than what's on your medical chart. um
Mhm.
yeah, that's wow, that was so powerful. All right, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Kenny, I love you so much. I love you. I love you, love you, love you, and adore you. And so I will say, but what you just said, it was so important for me to connect to my medical team. Dr. Tranmer, I was very connected with, because of course I spent a lot of time with him in the few months prior. But it's a teaching hospital. There's a lot of residents there. And also the anesthesiologist, you meet them right before you go into surgery. And I literally, it's Amy Odafe. I'll give her a shout out too. I said to her, Dr. Odafe, I feel this connection to Dr. Trammer, but literally you're the one keeping me alive for the next like 5 or 6 hours. And I want to feel connected to you. I literally verbalized that to her. And she like kind of grabbed my leg. And again, like she looked into my eyes and she said, Elizabeth, I only do round trips. We're going to see each other on the other side of this. And I wrote her a thank you. So afterwards, it was very important for me to show my gratitude too. I emailed her just like a very heartfelt thank you of how much it meant to me that she took that time to connect with me. And she, I mean, you want to cry. She sent me the most beautiful response of just like, thank you so much for recognizing what we do. It's very important for me to connect with my patients. It's not just, giving you medicine to keep you alive. It really is important to have that connection. And I feel like she really taught her resident because he did that too. Because the reason he made me laugh is because there was a medical student and he kept saying like, Dave, can you grab that? And Dave was not turning. And then finally he said, shit, his name is Tim. I've been calling him Dave all day. And then he sort of like laughed and I laughed and then he like put the mask on and like, it was so human that he was willing to admit that he was calling this poor med student the wrong name the whole day. And just, he made me laugh like right before I went under. And what a better way to go into surgery than to have someone make you laugh. Like, I was very, very blessed by my team and, certainly Dr. Tranmer, but everybody else that was involved too. I was really lucky.
Wow. That's awesome. So what do you remember of waking up after the surgery?
I remember pain, even though they did a good job of giving me pain medications. I remember waking up and saying to Jeremy, it's 10 out of 10. My sister will tell you she remembers me just like constantly moaning and making noises. I certainly don't remember that, but I don't, I don't remember a lot, especially that first day. I remember my parents coming in, but not really looking at them. I remember being worried, like, did they get to eat while I was in surgery? I was very worried that people were taking care of themselves while they were waiting because it just felt like it was so much harder on them to wait. I remember the nurses were fantastic. One of the nurses, that my overnight SICU nurse, was the girlfriend, and I worked with her at my hospital, and a girlfriend of one of my favorite doctors. And I had told her when I was having my surgery, and she specifically got assigned to me. So that was really special. I remember day 2, I was throwing up a lot. I don't do well with pain medications. I was just nonstop getting sick. They put like a patch behind my ear, which finally made that go away. I remember the nurses saying something about how I was situated in the bed. They needed me to stand up, take 2 steps, and then sort of sit back down so they could position me. And I remember calling it a field trip because it felt like such this epic thing to stand up and get out of bed and take 2 steps. I was like, oh, that was like a field trip, guys. And, I started like a catheter in, and I think I still had the IV in my foot at that point, which was really awkward. I don't like IVs. I had the arterial line in. I had the drain in my head. I just remember like so many wires, like kind of everywhere, and just really just begging them as quickly as they could to just get as many IVs out as they could. And I remember when they moved me from the SICU to the neuro floor, it was nighttime. I think it was maybe 9 or 10 at night. And I remember everything feeling so intense and so overwhelming, like the lights, if they bumped the gurney, people walking by and talking, just everything was so amplified and overwhelming. And it just took a lot out of me, literally them just wheeling me up a few floors in the hospital. I remember, so I had my surgery on a Wednesday. Dr. Chandler wanted to discharge me on a Friday, and I begged him to let me stay till Saturday because I just envisioned going home and my kids were going to be like jumping on me. And I was just like, I just need another day to sort of like feel a little bit more, like myself. And I remember getting up with physical therapy. And again, everything just felt so like intense. And I didn't realize it at the time, but she was like, "Elizabeth, you're walking like you're a 90-year-old woman. Can you, like, speed it up a little bit?" I was like, "Oh, yeah, like, I do walk normally faster than this." You know, like, just, like, like, it was so overwhelming that I was, like, walking, like, in little
Well,
miniature
to your
steps.
defense, I mean, you did have a craniotomy. I'm just saying, but,
Yeah.
yeah, I can
Yeah.
absolutely relate. Yeah, taking a couple of steps felt like
It's a
running a
big
marathon,
deal.
you
Yeah,
know?
and I remember my oldest, who was 6 at the time, they were in the waiting room, and I walked to the end of the hallway, and it was the first time he had seen me walk, since I've been in this hospital, and he was just beaming and just, like, so happy, and I think, like, seeing his reaction, um yeah, just very important for me to see his reaction and realize I'd come out the other side. Like, to his six-year-old mind, it was like, "Okay, she's good. Like, she walked down the hallway, she's good. We're good."
What did you and Jeremy tell your kids about what was
Oh.
happening with you?
That's a very good question. So I always try to be honest with them now, more so while they're older. They were 3 and 6, so they were really little. And I tried to be open enough that something was happening, but not scare them.
Mm.
And so I literally said, "Mommy has a boo boo and it's inside my head, and a doctor is going to fix it." And that was it. And my 3-year-old said, "Oh, are they gonna cut your head open?" I
Oh,
said,
wow.
"Actually, yes, they are." Like, kids sometimes, like, we need to give them more credit because he was
Yeah.
just like, "Oh, okay." Like, just very accepting of this. I do think, when I came home, I think it was a little freaky kinda seeing it's pretty elaborate stitches and scar, and I think that was a little intense for them at first, but they adjusted really well. But I really just kept it very simple, but also not keeping it from
Mm.
them. And I think that was important. And if they were a little older at the time, or maybe this is a new thing, there's actually a doctor who's on Instagram who does things with Play-Doh, and she has a very cool video of her and her son doing a craniotomy with Play-Doh. And they kind of
Okay.
cut it open and they do the burr hole, and they're using like a toy plastic drill. And had I had that tool, I probably would have shared that with them.
Mm.
I've since shared it with them to say this is what happened, but yeah, just kept it simple.
Wow.
I did find out, I had a friend visit in Vermont a few years ago, and she said to me, "I never told you this, Elizabeth, but 2 weeks before your surgery, there was a mom at my nephew's school who had the same exact thing, and she died during surgery."
Oh,
And we were hiking, and I just, like, stopped and lost my breath, and thank God she didn't tell me beforehand, obviously. But,
Yeah.
you know, I think there's constant reminders of just how fortunate we all are to
Yeah.
still be here.
yeah. We um our kids at the time when Kathy had her craniotomy, I think 9,
Mhm.
and we did not. I did not. Well, Kathy obviously wasn't able to, but I
Yeah.
I did
No
not.
say.
I did not share anything. I don't know. I guess I didn't want to scare them. I didn't think they could handle it. So
Yeah.
I didn't tell them like pretty much anything. Like, well, she, you know, said your mom's in the hospital. She, they're taking care of her, but she'll be okay. But and then later on, they did share with me that they were really upset with me for not being open with them and telling them, and not trusting them
I
to
think,
be able to handle it.
you know Rob, you were in such a different position though, because, looking back, Kathy is obviously like the poster child for brain aneurysm survivors, running 25 marathons and, achieving all these wonderful things. But I imagine that at that time, it was so scary and so tenuous. You didn't know what this outcome was going to be. And 1,000,000%, I would have done exactly what you did. And I mean, you told her she was in the hospital, and I would have given the same details because I imagine at that time you had no idea what the future was going to hold, and
Yeah.
you really probably couldn't really tell them much more than that she was at the hospital and being taken care of, right?
Well, I
Yeah.
think it's to Rob's defense too. Um, it was probably for him very hard to tell the kids because they were there when it happened. You know,
Ugh,
I don't know if they saw me collapsed or getting, rushed into the ambulance. But yeah, if I was in your situation, honey, I don't think I would have told them. I think, I mean, my parents didn't even know. And well,
yeah.
they were, well, I think because they were older, much older, in their late 80s, and my dad was already quite fragile. We didn't want to. I well, my brothers and sisters, all 8 of them, didn't want to worry my parents to cause more stress. And I think that probably rolled down to our children. You know,
Mhm.
I can certainly understand that they may have been upset at the moment when they realized what happened, but I think you did the right thing. Yeah.
Mhm. I do too. I do too. And we do want to protect those people that we love, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, especially
Yeah.
our children.
Thank you for that. I think, I
Yeah.
guess looking back, it's like you just kind of figure things out as it goes, like
Yeah.
almost minute by minute sometimes when these things happen.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
how long were you in the hospital recovering for? Like after the surgery?
So yeah, so surgery on a Wednesday, out of the SICU on Thursday night, and then tried to discharge me Friday, and then I fought for Saturday morning.
Wow, that is
And so
That's
Saturday
short.
really
morning.
fat.
Wow.
That's a very
Yeah.
short stay.
Yeah.
Um, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Hmm.
So they're like, you should be able to take care of yourself. Go home. Like after.
No.
Oh,
No, not at all. So he had told me 6 weeks off of work.
Yeah.
He told me to, like, for a month, really have someone there. So my parents did come up from Pittsburgh. My mom stayed for a month. My dad stayed, I think, about 2 weeks. And really, like, I would say, the first, especially 4 or 5 days home from the hospital, I just slept a lot. Like, I would sleep for 13 hours. I would wake up and have breakfast and say, I'm tired. I got to go back to bed. Like, just, eating breakfast would take a lot out of me.
mm,
I can remember the first time I got a shower, like, the feeling of and Kathy, I don't know if you can, where you were at this point, the feeling of the water hitting me, the steam in the shower, the light, like everything was just so overwhelming. And have to take a nap after that. There's just such this exhaustion after that. That really and truly, I mean, yeah, I'd wake up, go back to sleep, wake up a little bit more, go back to sleep. And that was probably, yeah, the first, I'd say 4 or 5 days, and then got better after that. Even so, that was June. We were planning to go to um, Provincetown, Massachusetts. My mom loves lighthouses, and so for her 70th birthday, we were staying in the lighthouse, Race Point Lighthouse. And so it's a pretty good drive from Vermont through Cape Cod. And I remember Dr. Trainer saying, like, that's probably going to be a tough trip for you, Elizabeth. Like, you can do it, but it's going to be a tough trip. So even 2 months out from, not having a rupture, even, yeah, I remember being tired that trip, and walking around Boston on the way and having to take breaks and just feeling really, really tired. And then I did take 6 weeks off. I was per diem, so it was really for me, it was very easy to go back to work because it was like 1 day a week. And I worked in a hospital, so everybody was like, "Oh, that's so cool. Let me see your scar." Like, asking me questions, which is also kind of therapeutic because I could process it with people. Um, so it wasn't bad for me to go back to work, but I know for some people when they have to go back full time and if it's a more intense job, it can be really overwhelming.
mm.
So,
Yeah.
how do you think life changed for you afterwards? And was it something? Was it kind of your intention to, I want to get back to normal, get back to my usual, usual
I
activities,
think,
usual schedule,
yeah,
routine?
that's a really good question. I think I'm a really slow processor, so I would say it took me probably like a year to kind of like unpack the experience and kind of work through. I did like very severe survivor's guilt afterwards for a long time.
Mm,
I think particularly because my boss died, right when I was surviving.
mm,
Um, So I think it took me a while to kind of unpack the emotions of it. I will say I remember saying to Jeremy, like, I think after brain surgery, I'm just gonna be like this super chill person that like doesn't get stressed anymore. That didn't happen. I'm still me. I'm not super chill. But I will say, August of 2020, I had my second surgery, which was to remove some of my plates that I had an infection. And when I found out I had to have a second surgery, I was like, all right, that's fine. This is what we're doing. And I thought, gosh, I really did kind of learn something through that whole experience because I am not having the reaction I had the first time. And I'm just sort of like, all right, well, this is what we're doing. Like this is like, I don't have a choice in this. I have to do this. So I was very much more accepting of it. Even though I didn't become this like chill, calm person, I think that for sure I am extremely grateful every single day. I talk to people as if it's going to be the last time I talk to them, and I want it to be the last words I say to them. I'm very conscious of expressing gratitude, of using like kind words, of apologizing if I do something wrong. I'm very conscious of that as I move through life. And I think I'm a case manager, and like when I deal with my patients, I very much know how vulnerable it is to be a patient, whether it's in the hospital or if it's in the primary care setting. I very much strive to like make people feel seen and make them feel like just that what they're going through has value.
Mm.
And yeah, I really try to live very deliberately, I would say now, and kind of my actions and in my words. I really just try to be very genuine and authentic. I don't have time for trying to be, cool or whatever. Like I really strive to be very genuine with people. And yeah.
Well, for the amount of time that I've known you, you're absolutely 1000% so gracious and absolute. I mean,
Yeah.
genuine to
I
a fault. But
I thought that was just being I thought that
yeah,
was just being a Vermonter.
yeah,
I was like, I think
they're
everyone from
they're
Vermont seems very nice.
yeah, they're so chill, and but I
I'll
do want
credit
to
it to
say one
Pittsburgh
thing
instead. I'm a
before
Pittsburgher
we
still.
is that you obviously we met each other through Instagram, and I it was fairly recent that you wrote this post, but as you know, a lot of our fellow survivors suffer survivor's guilt, and I think it's just human of us, especially I think
Mhm,
more so for those who don't who come out of this completely deficit free.
mhm,
um
mhm,
but I just want to thank you for writing on there. And for some reason, I thought I had forgiven myself for survivor's guilt, but what you said, and it was just so simple that I was like, you know what? I'm good. I'm good now. I'm not even gonna think about it anymore. If there's any guilt, it's gonna be turning that guilt into something positive.
mhm,
Continue to do what we're doing. But what you wrote was, you had survivor's guilt, but you had two boys that needed their mom, and I was just
mhm,
like,
mhm,
that was yeah. I didn't
mhm,
think about that. It's
mhm,
just it was more like now that I'm alive, from going
mhm,
through all of this, what should I do? I have to
mhm,
do something. I'm meant to do something. But
mhm,
it was what you said, which is so absolutely simple and so like, aha. It was like an aha moment for me. I swear to God. I don't think
mhm,
I shared that with you. I should have, but it really hit me to the core. And it was like, that's right. I shouldn't have
mhm,
survivor's guilt because
mhm,
I s- there were still two kids that needed
mhm,
their mom.
mhm.
So thank you.
And yeah, that's really what it comes down to, right? And I think you and I are similar. I mean, you're certainly doing enough for like 10 lifetimes of what you're doing, but certainly that was part of the Rita Scourge grant of like honoring my grandma and just feeling like so much of the reason I'm alive is because of her. And I think about how much she suffered afterwards from her brain aneurysm. She had to wear a patch on her eye because she had this like nerve damage and like a droopy eye. And there were no chat boards. I was talking to Rob before we started, but there were no chat boards, there were no podcasts, there were no stories you could find online. And that's why I'm so grateful you asked me to do this because that is a lifeline for people. It can be a life raft when you feel like, okay, somebody gets this, someone has been through it, they've come out the other side, it's gonna be okay. And yeah, that the rediscouraged grant was because I really wanted to honor my grandma because she suffered so much, and I feel like her suffering, the purpose of that was my survival.
Mm.
And I need to not just take that and say, oh, hey, great, that, I need to kind of pay that debt back. And my way of paying that debt to her is kind of by honoring her and by hopefully being the best mom that I can be. I'm not perfect by a long shot, but that's what it comes down to, right? Is that my two boys still have a mom, and there's nothing more than that, right? Like that's everything. That's everything.
Yeah.
That survivor's guilt can either take you to a self-destructive path, I think, in a
Mhm.
very negative
Mhm.
place, or you can turn that into something very positive. And I think it's very difficult. I mean, I'm not gonna downplay how hard it is to process survivor's guilt. And I obviously I've not not neither of your shoes. I've never been in your shoes, so I can just imagine it's got to be very difficult. And I think a lot more people out there, I think, than would admit so, do suffer from survivor's guilt.
Mhm.
A lot of survivors, and it can lead to a destructive path.
Yeah,
But
and I think
so glad you guys, you're able to take that into a positive place. And I know you've been very active, and that's one thing I was going to kind of ask about is you've been very active in the brain aneurysm community, in a very positive way, and just kind of wanted to dig into that. What fuels you to be so active?
yeah, and I think, I wasn't ever like destructive, but I think I was like unhealthy with my survivor's guilt, where it was like almost like this like internal sense of panic, not really panic, but just like, I need to do more. I need to do more. I survived. So I need to be like proving like why I'm here. And there had to
Mm.
be like almost these check boxes that I was filling. And it was this very like, and I also simultaneously had this, I think when you have like a, not near death, but like kind of like a traumatic experience. I also remember saying to Jeremy, like, nobody understands, like, we don't have enough time. There's not enough time to do what we need to be doing. And I very much felt this like propelling me forward. And, luckily that kind of intensity went away, but it really did fuel, this one day I was like laying in bed and sort of just like thinking of my grandma and thinking of why I survived besides my kids. And it was right after George Floyd. And then I was thinking about the statistics of brain aneurysms, and it's women and Black and Hispanic. And all of this was kind of like swirling in my head. And I thought, I want to create a grant that will fund that kind of research for Black, Hispanic, female brain aneurysm research. And I want to honor my grandma. And so that's why I started the Rediscouraged grant. And then that was really important to me. It was really important to me that kind of, I mean, it's not widely known, but like people know her name and they kind of know her story. And I mean, I'm part of that, but I wish I could take myself out of it. But obviously, I'm a part of that story. And then more recently, I did a Rediscouraged fund for UVM Medical Center where I had my surgery and where I work. I'm now outpatient, but because I was thinking through, I have really good insurance, but I still had, I don't know, a few grand maybe, and like co-pays for all the hospitalization and the tests and kind of all those things. And I was lucky my husband could take off of work and I could, take off of work. But there are a lot of patients who come from these really tiny towns in rural Vermont and rural upstate New York. And they have to come to Burlington because it's the closest place. And they have to drive and spend gas money and parking and all of these different things. And there were a lot of people that couldn't afford to do that. And so I created this fund at the hospital where we'll give people $500 for literally anything they want. I want them to share their story of what they're using it for. But if they need it for fuel because they can't afford their fuel because they're not working, or if they need it for co-pays or whatever, then they can use it for that. And we actually just had our first application. It was one of the neuro residents who picked a patient and was like, I think this person could use it.
Oh.
And she's now in a wheelchair, and her husband asked that it be used to get her a ramp to be able to get in and out of her home.
That
So
that is so wonderful. I mean,
I cried, Kathy. I cried when I got the application.
no, I mean, see, that's the thing I love about survivors, about just people like you in general. You say it, you want to do it, and you made it happen. And how wonderful is it for the recipient to have someone to, I don't know why I'm getting so freaking emotional, but anyways, for them to feel so lucky when they get chosen, to say, "Wow, I can't believe this person is so genuinely, um, what's the word for you? You're like a saint to even think that far." No, 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 please. I really, I know I feel like I've known you much longer than we've actually known each other. But like I said in the past, you've just been so gracious with your your whole journey. And I'm telling you, when one, whether it's $500 or $25,000, it's that one person you've just made like a huge, enormous difference. If not for a lifetime for them, but just that one moment when they turn in their application and then coming to realization that they were given what they need just so that they can make something so much more comfortable for their family member. That's tremendous. I mean,
But
um
really, it's my family and friends and you guys who donated a large amount from We Run With You. That's really who deserves the credit. I mean, family and friends who have been so generous, from my closest, like my parents, my siblings, my cousins, but people who I know through Instagram who live in California, or people in
mm,
my town who I didn't know that well. Like, you know, it really is, when you say it like takes a village, like it takes
mm,
a village, and it was all of those
yeah.
donations that really made it possible. And I think there's a woman I follow on Instagram who does like the Good Ancestor podcast. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but I think of that a lot, of like, I I want to be a good ancestor. Like, I want to make
Mm,
my kids proud. I want to do something for the future, but I also want to honor my ancestors, and I want to honor my grandma, and kind of, be in that continuum of being a good ancestor. And that's kind of what fuels me. And obviously it's brain aneurysms. It's my passion, you know?
and I think
Um,
you've far exceeded your own expectation.
Well,
I don't know. I'm just rolling with it. I literally am just rolling with it and kind of learning as I go. And the fund was hard to get off the ground, even though I work in the hospital. I have the connections. It was tough to get off the ground, to get everything in place for that.
well,
Um,
I think the world needs, you know, people like you and, and Kathy too. Because the way I look at it, you guys are the engines that drive these, I guess, this meaningful change, right? In either big or small, or in all different ways in different communities, and more specifically in the brain aneurysm community, um, and because you're gathering the people and that want to make also
Mm,
a difference, right, and want to do something meaningful, but need somebody to make that happen, right,
yeah,
to bring everybody together and say, all right, we're going to do this and
yeah.
we're going to make a difference. And I think it's wonderful.
well, I really appreciate you guys, because I think that, like, what you guys are doing is serves such like a twofold purpose. Like, I know you're trying to get out information, and for people to be able to feel like they have someone to turn to, or they can get information, they can feel like they're not alone. But also, like, by you providing this platform for survivors to talk about their experience, like, it's so healing to be able to talk about it. And I mean, Kathy, I've told you, like, you are such a gem in this world, and just your energy and your, like, tenacity, and your willingness to kind of be vulnerable. You share so much in your posts about the ups and downs. It's not just like, oh, I ran a marathon, great. You really share the ups and downs of that, and that's really important. And I think I say it to you, I think like you fill my soul up. Like being near you fills my soul up. And Rob, I probably spent more time with you maybe that weekend than I did with
Yeah,
So,
Kathy because she was running
we were
and
chasing her around.
I was eating my crepes and we're trying to dart around to see where we could see her to cheer her on. But you know, it's very special, Rob, that this is certainly Kathy's passion and she wants to spread the story, but just the support that you give to her and watching you cheer for her and watching you be so in tune with her kind of after the Vermont marathon and kind of supporting her. It's just very special. You guys are very special and yeah, you fill my soul up.
yeah, he's a keeper.
He's a keeper.
Yeah. But not to take anything away, and I certainly don't want you to downplay what you've done, and you really shouldn't, because just like Rob said, you are gathering people, this community, people outside of this community to come together. And you got to give yourself a whole lot more credit, because you are absolutely, and you've gotten all these people together because you know what? They love you, they believe in you, and they're like, you know what? I want to support her, make a difference for others. And if it's just takes me pulling out a credit card, hey, I'm going to do it. But you know what? People do that for people who they respect and believe in. And so I never want to have anyone who does something so of this magnitude, because what you're doing is huge. It's big. Um, and again, I think what I'm trying to say is that you are someone who fellow survivors, recent survivors, and family members who are caring for survivors can look at and say, you know what? If this lady can go through all that pain and suffering and stress, and to still come out of it whole, and yet is giving back in an enormous way, it's because you are just genuinely so gracious in what you say, and your action speaks much louder than words. So please don't ever feel like you should be glazed over, because you really shouldn't. And and that's why I think I kind of clung on to you. I'm like, golly, this woman is like, I have so much respect for. Yes, we run with you, has been doing this, what, maybe since 2016. Not really. We run with you until 2018, but that was not even at the magnitude that we are at. It was just purely a community to
Share
share
stories. Yeah.
stories. That was it. Um, and it's individuals like you who are helping us grow our tribe. You know, um, we don't want to grow the tribe, but
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
yeah.
But those that have become part of the We Run With You tribe, it's just, I think every single person has value in this community. And
Mhm.
Rob and I will always say, we're just absolutely grateful for each and every one of you. And just the fact that, jumping on and saying, yeah, I'd love to be part of this episode. And because, even just sharing your story brings so much value, because one person can listen to this and say, yeah, I can do it. I can do what Elizabeth is doing, and I can do what Laura's doing, and so many other Elizabeth and Laura's out
Mhm.
there.
Yeah.
We want to be able to just say, yeah, you guys, we're here for you. We're here for you, and you're doing that for
Well,
so many.
Kathy, it's not how I roll to take accolades or whatever, but I will say I I really value you and your opinion and your thoughts, and so it means so much to me that you said what you just said. I'll try to internalize it. But you also said something that is very important for me to emphasize too, is that it really was an honor that people trusted me enough to donate their hard-earned money for this cause. And I definitely don't take that lightly. And I think too, what you said about kind of connections with other survivors, like Alejandra and Danny, I know were on recently, and just, they hold a special place in my heart. And there's so many more that, there's just some very, very special people in this Brain Aneurysm Survivors Club. And I do hold a lot of weight in making people feel seen and valued who have gone through this or are still going through this. And so thank you for saying that, because that really is everything to me. It really is.
Elizabeth, this has certainly been fun, enlightening, and
A little teary.
inspiring. Yeah, emotional too,
I'm sorry.
but
You guys are the
and,
best. I'm sorry.
and definitely inspiring conversation. And really thank you for sharing your story. Is there, before we end is there anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't maybe get into, or
I'll probably think of it 10 minutes after we stop talking. I mean, I think that was the big stuff. I think, yeah, clutching onto the little moments that we can be grateful for, and just trying to connect with each other, and, trying to be a little vulnerable with each other and be genuine. And, especially in this community, that goes a long way. But I just think as human beings, it's really important that we all strive for that. And just my gratitude for you two, and how much I love you guys and adore you.
thank you.
And maybe you'll be back to the Vermont City Marathon one of these years. I know it's not going to be next year, but maybe you'll come back.
Probably back to Vermont, but just to enjoy some
Just to
hikes
visit,
and the outdoors.
get some Ben and
Well,
Jerry's.
I do say never, but yeah, that's gonna take some arm twisting.
Yes, I know. I have a lot of, speaking of survivor's guilt, like, I have a lot of guilt that I convinced you. It'll be cool and it won't be hot. Don't worry. It's brutal.
I'm over it. It's all good. Hey, the silver lining was I got to see you, your boys, Jeremy, got to hang out. So no, it's it's never, there's never any regrets. I still get to
Yeah.
do that,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's all
Yeah.
good. It's all good.
But yeah, really thank you for spending this time with us. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you guys so much. So wonderful to see you.
We Run With You is a nonprofit with a mission to improve the lives of people suffering from brain injury and disease by funding research, raising awareness, and providing support for survivors and their families. Find out more at werunwithyou.org. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a comment or review. Until next time, keep doing good.